Crystal Palace have been abandoned. Arguably one of the worst 7 to 10 days in a football club's history. It has been absolutely unprecedented what we've seen. The exit to Macclesfield, the manager, players leaving, the captain leaving, and more rumoured players leaving. We today discussed the downfall of Crystal Palace. How has it gone so wrong so quickly? And more importantly, how can they rebuild and recover from this situation? First things first, though, if you are here, please do consider subscribing to our channel. It's absolutely free, and we've got weekly and daily football content. Let's start off, Jamie. We've got to come to you first. How do you assess this Palace situation? This has been one of the most rapid declines I think we've ever seen in such a short space of time. What is going on right now?
Well, weirdly, obviously, if you look back to the start of the season, they got off to a flyer. They obviously were on the FA Cup win, so that got them into the Community Shield, and then they won that. So I think everyone at Palace would have been, buzzing at the start of the season, thinking, okay, there was the controversy over being in Europa to Conference League, but however, if you're looking at it, Conference League is easier to win, so maybe even Palace could go and win that competition. And now you've come to sort of January time, and you're looking at it like this is a disaster. Like we could be talking about sort of relegation in a few years if the decline keeps going, or somehow Palace have got to go and buy basically a whole new spine of the squad. So this is where it is. It's just fallen off a cliff, really, compared to what it was at the start of the season. But I have to say, it's probably one of the you sort of mentioned worst sort of 7 days, but that press conference that Glasner had, I think, has to go down as the most depressing conference possible. Him going, "I'm leaving at the end of the season, and yes, our captain is leaving and won't be available on the weekend." It really doesn't get much worse than that in a press conference. Apart from maybe, saying you've got 5 injuries that are brand new or something like that. I can't really think of one that would be as bad as that. So it's a terrible time for Palace, to be honest. And that's just the confirmed ones. And like you said, there's sort of rumours that, Mateta probably wants to leave. There's been rumours on Wharton for sort of, I think for the last 18 months. Nothing concrete on that one. But it's all sort of falling after what seems to be such a promising end of last season. So it's not a good time for Palace right now.
Yeah, I mean, this was Reece. We'll come on to you, but this felt like such an opportunity for Palace to go and build and move forward, and fans get excited about the future. So, Reece, how has it gone so literally the polar opposite of that so quickly?
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? In the space of about what, 8 months, they've gone from winning their first major honour to where they are now, which obviously they're not in any danger of going down, but I can see where there's now disengagement with fans, manager, board. Um, I mean, it seems like the straw that really broke the camel's back is obviously selling Marc Guéhi now. It was announced, he was announced he was going to be sold just before the Sunderland game, or they'd accepted the bid just before the Sunderland game. So Glasner had said he'd made that clear, he'd put him in his plans all week, and then has to change that. Um, which obviously is just amplified from the summer when they tried to sell him on deadline day. Marc Guéhi said he wasn't going to sign a new deal. But they decided to recoup the money now. However, I don't really see any player in line to replace him, which is, I think, that only adds to Glasner's frustrations because he has delivered success that Crystal Palace have not had. Um, and he's asking to be backed. But then he also said that he spoke with Parish in October and said he wasn't renewing his contract. So why would you back him if he's going to leave? They've already signed Brennan Johnson, which is a sign that they're happy to back him. But it seems six of one, half a dozen of the other at the moment. And it's contributed to such a negativity around the club. It's no real shock that they've not won a game in 10. And the Macclesfield defeat is just the icing on the cake, really.
Yeah, I do want to understand, and obviously Palace fans watching, let us know in the comments your thoughts on this, because from an outside point of view, for me, I'm blaming the owner here. I'm saying you've got a good manager, you've basically got a decent squad, and he's won you a trophy. And rather than do anything or invest or whatever, you're basically just sticking with being a selling club. Personally, for me, I feel like that sits with the ownership, and I think he is a manager who is justified being backed. I know the Guéhi one's weird because it's like they've got to sell him to make money if he's going to leave on a free. I mean, Liverpool have been shafted, by the way, because they were basically going to sign him for 40 mil. Now City, their rivals, have signed him and at a cheaper price. So they've got to be fuming, by the way. But that's just a funny consequence. But I I did. I'll say though, because the reason I asked that is because we did a TikTok on it. I did a TikTok on it, and our Palace fan was basically saying Glasner's got a history of doing this. So my assumption was that Palace fans were all like, "Oh, it's on Parish," but actually, it seems that maybe not. Reese, I know you know a bit more about the Glasner, the background of Glasner and what he's done before, but for me, have I got this wrong? Like, is this on Glasner just with his outburst? I don't know. Are we missing something here?
I don't think we fully are missing something. It is going to be sort of, has Glasner been sort of, poached for a better job? There's a few that are coming up that are bigger than Palace. Like, no offense to Palace, but you're not the biggest team in, like, by no means. Then you've got the likes of losing Eze in the summer to Arsenal. It's hard to say no to a club like Arsenal. It's hard to say no to a club like Liverpool when they were going to sell Guéhi. Now it's hard to say no to City. So Palace are in a problem of that state of where they've got the success. Teams then go, actually, I want him, I'd like him. And it's really hard for them to say no. Glasner, yes, you're not going to be happy selling your best players. Like, you'd like to keep your current squad, maybe lose one, but then build by buying a few and bettering the squad. And I do feel like it's 50-50 in a way. Like, you can blame the owners, but you can also blame the manager in that aspect as well.
Yeah, but Glasner would have known that that's Crystal Palace's model before he joined, right? And I think this is where like people are too quick to blame the owners, but let's not forget like they've been a solid Premier League club since since they came here in 2013, 14. Okay, they had a yo-yo period. They had a period of 6, 7 years where they weren't even getting into the Premier League. They've been here for 10 years or over 10 years, 13 years now because of this model. The model allows them to do that. If that's what makes them happy, they'd rather stay in the Premier League, then they'll do that. I think that this model is flawed in the sense of your luck runs out eventually. But you got, and I think that's where they need to be careful. And they should have really built on this success of the FA Cup. They should have looked at that FA because it's very, very rare that a club with this model is successful in terms of trophies like this. It wasn't like an off the post deflection. They won by being the better team and in the Community Shield as well. Let's not forget that. So that's where they should have gone. We can take this forward here. Glasner would have probably stayed if he wasn't going to be poached. But it's created this cauldron of players know they're there to develop so they can then leave. So if you sell Eze, Marc Guéhi is gonna, Marc Guéhi's not going to be like, well, why can't I go? You know, you need to get that kind of model out if you want to push forward. But it's created a vicious cycle where there's no winners in this. But I also support the board a lot because Glasner should know that that's the model coming in. And yeah, he's done this before. He fell out with George Schmack, or sorry if I've butchered that, at Wolfsburg. He left Frankfurt after winning the Europa League, It's all
Does this tie in to everything we've seen in recent times with, again, I'll use the Chelsea example because it's a perfect analogy. Maresca, plucked from the Championship, wins trophies, then believes he has more of a right to tell the owners how to run the club. Is that just what we're seeing now? And Amrim's a bit different because I don't think he had the trophies to back it up. But in the last, I mean, literally like the last 20 days, basically, we've seen this revolution of managers starting to give it large and basically slate the owners in press conferences. to potentially get sacked. And it feels like Glasner, we're seeing the same thing. He's come in knowing the deal. He's then won a trophy, seen the potential growth, and gone, yeah, maybe start listening to me. And then they feel like they've got the authority to challenge the owners. Is that the new trend that we're seeing now?
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be definitely that managers have dominated the transfer window more than players have.
Yeah.
Um, I think we're still in the midst of football where we have a lot of players who played under a manager. The term of a head coach is very, very new, right? Um, and we've got and people that go into a job, they want to be able to run it top to bottom. Brian Clough was a success because of it. Don Revie, Arsene Wenger, Sir Alex Ferguson, Matt Busby. Yes, this is all in the past now. I'm sure, but if you look at, say, Pep Guardiola, Arteta, they've got control and you can see where it's working. However, that creates problems as well. If you know, but this is a new model, this is a new game, and eventually you're going to get the coaches come through that are that head coach role. I'm only here to develop players and win games. Liam Rosenior is that first example. Okay, he'd be a perfect fit for Palace if he was available, but this is where there's still that blur between the lines of it's a business, it's football, and there's like tectonic plates at the moment. They're sort of grating against each other, and eventually it explodes.
Yeah, I think it's a really good analogy, to be honest, for what we're seeing. Um, we're seeing it again. Maybe it's different circumstances, but Real Madrid, another big name manager gone. Celtic, another bit. I know it's different circumstances, but we're just seeing this revolution of clubs and managers. It's almost like a revolution, and it feels new and it feels unprecedented. Um, let's talk Glasner just quickly then. Are we? I know we've kind of touched on him, but do we think he is right to come out in the press conference and say that he's been abandoned, the team's been abandoned?
I know this is sitting on the fence, but he's right and wrong. What
That's
he's
not a good
what
answer.
No, because what the words that he's saying, going, we feel abandoned because we've just sold our player 28, 36 hours before our next game. That is being abandoned. It's your captain as well, so it's even bigger influence. However, you're hanging out your dirty laundry. That's it. You're doing it, and it causes more of a chaos within the club. And you've seen it before where players have done the exact same thing, where they've sold a player 24 hours, whatever, how many hours it's before a game, and he's just not in the squad for the next one. The manager in the press conference just goes, no comment, move on. It's things like that. So you've seen it in the past, and he's come out and gone, no, I'm causing full destruction, basically. I'm going at the board, I'm calling it out as it is, but the problem is he doesn't care because he's leaving in the summer anyway. So if he wasn't leaving in the summer, I don't think he would react like this. And that's where I don't think it's right. He should be a bit more. It's a bit more respectful to Palace in whole. As sort of you just don't do that. You don't go and attack the board like this when you're leaving anyway. If he wasn't leaving and he wanted to make a statement, I'd understand it more. But I just feel like he's just gone. I really don't care what people think. I'm just going to say exactly what I want, and I don't care who it hurts.
Well, if we look at the timeline, and Reece, I think you just said a minute ago, in October, he confirmed he wasn't renewing. Is that right?
Yeah,
So let's say that is the case for whatever reason, maybe because of the Eze sale, maybe they've had conversations about transfers. Their form has, I need to check every single individual fixture, but I mean, what is it? 0 wins and 10. So is this Glasner's lost the plot, not lost the plot, but Glasner's engagement with the club and energy and effort has declined basically exactly after he's decided to not renew. And what we're seeing now is a result of that rather than anything else. And he's then chucking all everything else into the mix. Because that's the other argument. He's had enough. It's being replicated, or not replicated, but it's being basically the players are feeling it, for want of a better term. Is that what
yeah.
we're seeing now?
I mean, yeah. I mean, he sounds like a man at the end of his tether, doesn't he? No, no. coach, head coach, manager, what we want to call them, wants to see their best players leave. Um, Unfortunately, that's the nature of the game today. That's a discussion for another day, but it's unfortunate, and I'd be frustrated. And realistically, have they replaced them over the years? Yes, but it doesn't look like there's any ready replacements to come in. Eze leaves late on. Who did they bring in to replace him? Marc Guéhi, they almost sold on deadline day. Who was going to come in and replace him? It's already quite a thin squad. So I understood his frustrations, but he shouldn't have done what he did. I'm sorry, but it's unacceptable. Parish kindly kept it quiet from October. How that didn't leak, I don't know. So Parish kept his end of the bargain. He should have kept his and just stayed quiet, because now this airs into the public. It airs. How do you think the players feel? Realistically, they do have a relationship. This is probably going to create some sort of vacuum effect when more players will go, well, if he's not here, why do I want to be here? Why do I need to listen to him? And also, if Glasner was going to be tipped to join another club in the summer, was he going to stay anyway? So imagine if Palace backed him up with all these signings and then he went, you're going to be frustrated. Again, it's business. That's what happens. No hard feelings. But he should have stayed quiet. I think it was completely unprofessional. And I think clubs now should look at this and go, do we want him for that? Is this what we want? Do we want to repeat this cycle again? Because I just think it's unacceptable. You should have just stayed quiet. Yes, like we knew you were going. If you don't sign the contract, it's pretty obvious. Wait till the end of the season to say that. Now everything's up in the air. Why would they back him with players now? It's silly.
I think they've got to decide now whether they want players for Palace or the manager, right? So I think they'll potentially still bring in players. I mean, we've not got long left, but I think they'll still look to bring in players if they need them. But it won't be for the manager; it'll be for the team because they've still got an opportunity, right? Like they're among the favourites for the Conference League, and again, that could have been a perfect progression to go and win the Conference League, a nice European trophy, then get into the Europa League as a result. And again, we said at the start of the podcast, but this felt like a real leapfrog moment where they can go on that stepping stone and start to adventure. But now, given everything going on, I don't back them to win the Europa Conference League unless they get a new manager.
You've got to
That's
remember
the
that
sad reality.
they also didn't get in the top eight of the Conference League.
Mm.
They could have, and they probably should have, and they didn't. So Glasner, he did win the trophy, so he deserves some leeway from the Palace fans if he was continuing. But actually, he's been underperforming because I don't see any reason why Palace shouldn't get that top eight spot. And then I think I actually think Glasner is the worst one to be leaving for Palace because I think he is a very, very good manager. Because if you look, Guéhi's gone, but they've got, was it Leclerc, I might be butchering the name, and Richards. They're both very good centre halves. They're both very good. Like if you go to a back four, them two is your centre back pair, and that's fine. You've got, they've still got a good squad. And yes, it may mean, right, this season we are going to drop off a bit to what we probably wanted to push on to, but the squad's still there. But now you're going to be losing your manager, captain, you said Eze as well, then you're looking at, say, Mateta and possibly even Wharton in the summer. It then seems to be ripping up the squad, whereas I think if you had the manager, you've got someone who's a steady ship. But now there's nothing that's steady about Palace, and that I think is the biggest problem they've got. So I do believe, like we sort of said before, he's been completely unprofessional with his press conferences. It's fine to say Guéhi won't be a part of the squad, he's leaving, but you just leave it at that, or you say nothing at all. And unfortunately, I just don't see where the positives come from for Palace. And it's sort of even if Mateta leaves, it's sort of you can replace a striker. You can. I know he's been very good, but he's not been playing 90 minutes every week either. So it's not like he's unreplaceable. But I just think because you've got so many different places where people are leaving, it just means you don't know what's going to happen. Palace could generally turn it all around in the summer and have a great next season, or they generally could be doing what Wolves are doing and be bottom of the league. And you're looking at it going, how the hell has this happened?
Yeah, go on, Reece, go on.
No, I was gonna say I do agree. I think this is what I said earlier is I think Glasner creates a vacuum effect, doesn't he? I think again we'll use Man City as an example. If Haaland kicked up a fuss tomorrow, who's gonna go? Pep or Haaland? Haaland. So that's because they back the manager. I think the head coach has that bit in the middle of just they are the stability of the club or they are the complete disaster, like the disaster where it crumbles. Maresca was the example of how volatile it is. Jose Mourinho can be an example of how volatile it can be. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I think they're great coaches. Um, but it's just how it works. Whereas Sir Alex was clearly a calm, wasn't he? That stability. If you look since he's gone, they've not had the success that they would have liked. And I think this is where they could have had this in Glasner. Really had that. Like I said, two trophies. You can't shoot. They've got a great chance to win the Conference League. They should be the best team in it. They could win three trophies if you want to come out count Community Shield as major or not. Three trophies in the space of a year, three more than they've ever had. Same to build on. They could go on to win the Europa League. That squad would be good enough if they built on that. Now it's crumbled, and now they've got to start all over again. And you've got to get it's a decision to make on in the summer, or if they decide to let them go before then. What do they do? Do they go down the head coach route of a Rosinha, or do they try and find someone like Glasner again? Because they've got to get it right, otherwise they could find themselves in a little bit of trouble, in the next couple of years, where all that hard work of bringing young players and then selling them for big money means nothing if they find themselves in the championship. So it's a tough few months ahead.
Yeah, I just don't think you can replace the spine of the team like that. Mateta, Eze, Guéhi, like if all three of those go in less than a season, I just don't think there's. I know they can sign players and there's others who might step up, but there's not really much hope, is there? Let's be honest. You can't go into the transfer market with the budget of Crystal Palace and replace those players because again, you're taking a gamble on potential and you're having to invest. Brennan Johnson, what was that? 35 mil, I think it was. So like, obviously, I know he's free and his contract's up, but like Brennan Johnson, don't know, he's not as good as Eze, is he? He's more of an impact on that team, so it's like they're spending more on him than they're getting for Guéhi. I know that's a bit of a different situation, but for me, that doesn't feel like a team that's going to progress. And I guess we'll move on to it now. But where do we expect Palace to go in the next couple of years? Because for me, I'm not saying they're going to get relegated, but this feels like a team now that it wouldn't be that surprising once Glasner. Again, we don't know who they're bringing in, obviously, but if Glasner goes, Mateta goes, Eze's already gone, Guéhi's already gone. Let's say they do lose Wharton because there's a few clubs sniffing around him. He's gone a bit quiet, to be fair. But is there then a case to say this team can survive the Prem? I don't know. I think they're pretty. Obviously, it depends on who comes up, who goes down, obviously. But like, you certainly wouldn't be backing them for a top half finish. Let's put it that way. Whereas I think a lot of us at the start of the season were going, Palace could probably push on and get mid-table, top half. So it's a messy situation, and I think they're going to end up like a Leicester, who had a nice little trophy, had a nice glory days, sell all their best players, and then slowly it catches up with you in the end.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a tough. This is where they have to get their next decision right. I understand why they're keeping Glasner until the end of the season. I completely understand that. Um, who they go for from there, I think is where, like I said, is what I said a minute ago. Do they go for that Liam Rosinha type coach, a Thomas Frank style coach, um, who we know is under pressure at Spurs, where I think they would have the environment there to do very, very well. Um, Personally, I think this is where they have an opportunity to actually win back some fans, have again that calm head, that stability, and I think Gareth Southgate would be a good appointment here. um, because he fits the model that Crystal Palace are creating. We saw it with what he did with the England team and how he turned those around. And he's also a former Palace player. So I think he'd be a good, stable fit for them as they look towards what they're going to do in their next chapter. So I think he'd be quite a smart move. Is it long term? I'm not so sure. But I think he's the most viable option of people who are currently available, not tied down to another club or whatever. Because Palace have a habit of, going for a left field pick, which they did with Glasner. So I think Southgate would be a very good fit for them in the summer, and that would give them an opportunity to rebuild, bring a connection with the players, bring that connection with the board, and then go from there.
Yeah, I think that's a good shout. I also, for what it's worth, I don't think Glasner's going to sit out the season. Um, yeah, I don't see a U-turn. I think he'll say a few more dodgy comments, lose a few more games, and then he'll just get sacked personally. But we'll see what happens.
There is an article that came out sort of like today slash last night that said they're keeping him for now. But yeah, if he keeps making these comments, why on earth? Like, it's just not worth it for Palace
Mm.
unless the payout's just too much for him to actually let him go. Um, in terms of where they go, I really can only see the word down. Not like, man, relegation this season is they'll be fine because the teams in the bottom three for me are terrible. Yes, okay, none of them actually lost on the weekend, but I don't think any of them are good enough sides to actually claw back the gap that Palace already have on them. So that's where I think they're fine. But next season, I really struggle to see how they can turn it and not. I don't know. It's got to be like they've got to sign players who you don't really hear of because you've got to remember it's a World Cup like transfer window as well, which interrupts everything. You can't get the players you probably want, or if they have a really good World Cup, their price goes up by 10, 15 mil for certain players. So it can be a massive problem with the summer coming up for them. So I just think they're going to struggle again. And I think it will depend on how good the clubs that come up are, whether Palace go down or not. And that's sad considering how they ended last season. Really, that's the only way I can see it at the moment. I see very little hope for them, unfortunately. But I don't mind Palace, but yeah, that would be where I'm going with it. It's going towards going towards the bottom.
Yeah, and look, we're seeing this time and time again. That's the problem. You cannot sustain being in the Premier League if you keep selling your best players. It does work for a while, and it's worked for, as you said, 10 years. So maybe that's why they're pushing back on Glasner, as you said, Reese. But at the end of the day, I
I
don't
think
think it's
that's a
sustainable.
I think that's a bit harsh though, because when, like I said, with the clubs that come in for these players, how are you saying no to them? The players will want to go to an Arsenal, to Liverpool, to City, United. It's a
Yeah,
big problem. You can't say no. You might be able to say, okay, no, unless you give me 10, 15 more mil. But at the end of the day, you are still selling them. That's
Yeah,
the biggest
exactly.
problem. Such a tough way to actually go no. You're not having him because then the player gets annoyed because they want
Yeah.
to move to these big clubs.
Mm.
yeah. All right. Well, that is all we've got time for. As always, we want to hear from you down below. But as always, like, comment, and subscribe. You know the drill.